This is going to be an interesting video. I am once again going to reference Carl King. And yeah, he did a video years ago, and I did a reaction video. Tried to do a reaction video and failed. The whole thing with modern music is not visual. A lot of people do look to the visual when it comes to modern music. And while this is a weird thing, the thing is, I don't think it's a bad thing, but at the same time, I don't understand the annoyance, especially since it tends to draw in a lot of people who didn't really care about music to begin with. And unfortunately, we do have a trend where people pay attention to the music taste of those who don't really care. Now, of course, though, music was always a part of early entertainment, and I'm jumping into this because of Andy Edwards, which I'm going to talk about later. Which is why I had that on the bottom there, the clip from the cartoon I Want to Singer, in which case you have an owl that's singing a song that later got used in South Park and I think Fortnite as well. I don't know. I don't play Fortnite. I'm just going by what information that I've seen. And I think that they also referenced violinist and entertainer Jack Benny with the character Jackie Bunny. At least I think that's what they were referencing in that cartoon. I don't remember. But yeah, the biggest reason I want to reference it is because that scene is basically an homage to an early show that used to have like various talents go on to perform called The Gong Show. And The Gong Show was like a variety scene where you not just had people doing the visual thing to draw in attention, but you also had a lot of people who went in there to demonstrate their musical ability. And it wasn't just The Gong Show. Like, throughout time, there were also others such as American Bandstand, of course, so that was more focused on people who were dancing and stuff like that. And then eventually there was Soul Train, had their live performances. They would show people dancing, and a lot of times people would have this on in the background, not as a background noise thing, but so they could listen to the music and dance in their living rooms, just like the people on the TV are dancing. So yeah, it was a fun time for everyone. Although, obviously, Soul Train became more known for black entertainment, but at the same time, it was a very welcoming experience for everyone. It's one of those examples of actual inclusion, unlike today where it's used as a buzzword that has lost all meaning. But we are not here to rant about that. Although it really is sad how good concepts are being misused, which probably does subtract from the beauty that is in society. And honestly, since this is, as you could read from the intro, about modern music and beauty. But the big thing that had me going down this road was MTV. You have a whole bunch of people talking about it. Well, except for that on the bottom there, which is no labels necessary. But there's a point to talk about that. But yeah, you got 3 videos from Andy Edwards and one from Rock and Roll True Stories, talking about like the ups and downs of MTV. And I think this played a huge part in it because while MTV is thought to have brought the visuals and music videos, something that Andy Edwards had said in his videos was that MTV was not the first to do it, which is also why I made mention of American Bandstand, The Gong Show, and Soul Train. Matter of fact, one of the biggest reasons to point out Soul Train and the whole thing about inclusion is that MTV did have a bit of a history, which of course everyone has spoken of, even Adam Conover at some point. So some props to him for, despite how lackluster his Adam Ruins Music episode was, at least he mentioned that. But yeah, it was really weird how there was this attempt at segregating taste and such, which of course Andy rails against, But yeah, this idea that there's black music and white music, as if to say, and it's funny because there's a lot of instances where black people influenced white people and white people influenced black people. And that's not even getting into like the various influences of Eastern culture, Latin culture, and whatnot. Of course, so Andy Edwards did end up drawing fire by insisting that Native Americans were a part of the jazz movement, but that's besides the point. Um, but yeah, like MTV only hyper focused on one thing, and when they're rating, and it's funny because MTV also had a Beavis and Butthead, which was this stupid cartoon about a pair of stupid teenagers who would just get into trouble doing stupid things. But at the same time, there were also segments which probably influenced those of us who did the whole React thing, reactions, responses, and stuff like that. In which case, you'd have these two cartoon characters who would be, in a sense, reacting to music videos, you know? And for some people, they would call that like the tastemakers and whatnot. And while part of me thinks that it's funny that Beavis and Butthead never got caught up in the satanic panic like everything else related to rock, then again, they did have those random moments where, like, I think it was Beavis who said church sucks, and then Butthead, like, no, you go up there, you get the cracker, and you listen to the priest tell the stories. They're like, oh yeah, church is cool. We all stand together to sing our song. So yeah, they were just a couple of knuckleheads who just enjoyed rock music and metal. But yeah, like that was another instance of like the visuals and whatnot, drawing in people for music and whatnot. Something I failed to mention in my video where I talked about metalheads. But yeah, MTV went to doing other things when their ratings dipped, when all they had to do was listen to their audience. Their audience was saying that they were bored of the same thing over and over. And I mean, when Michael Jackson came along doing his thing, that actually added a much needed spark. You know, MTV was failing because it didn't have diversity. And again, I'm talking about true diversity, not this brain rotted nonsense that people want to call diversity when, let's be real, it really isn't. You know, not enough different opinions and backgrounds and styles and stuff like that. But of course, that's besides the point. But yeah, and MTV's falling was because they neglected the music, you know, what their core audience wanted, and only catered to the reality TV craze. You know, we all agree that that is a thing. Like, and the funny thing is, reality TV would not be a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to have their reality TV shows if they just continued playing the music and whatnot. But I think this is also why, because this is a trend that we see happening with music in the mainstream, you know, and MTV ended up being the canary in the coal mine. In which case, rather than having what's out there, like what American Bandstand did or what Soul Train did, you know, showing like all sorts of stuff, like be it rock, R&B, blues, jazz, pop, and whatnot, you know, you don't really get that anymore. But instead, it's just whatever a network thinks the people like, rather than actually listening to what people say they like. You know, that was why MTV failed. And as well as why, when it comes to a lot of these services, unfortunately, a lot of people are going by what the networks tell them they would like rather than what they would actually like. And of course, these days, with the whole thing of AI algorithms, it does make it harder to actually find what you're looking for. Not unless you find someone with links and they share said links, which is why a lot of times I will do that as well. I'm not sure if I'll do that with this video, but if people are interested, I will happily go through the trouble of creating playlists or not. Certainly would be easier than finding certain news stories that seem to be buried in the mess. But one other thing, though, I do have to point out, going back to what I said about people coming in who didn't really care, which is why at the very bottom there is music lost all its value again. Now, I'm not going to say music lost its values. As I've always said, it's those of us who are enthusiasts and hobbyists who really do respect the music, who are going to sit down and have a listen, do nothing else but listen. And yeah, I've actually done that quite a lot of times. No playing video games, no working on projects, just sit and listen. Sure, my taste may not be to what other people want, but that is basically how it is. So, the thing is, though, there are a lot of people, they don't respect the arts. They don't, and as I've always said, music is an audio art form. And with this low respect, they don't believe that money should go into it, which is horrendous. And I'm not going to be one of those people get on the whole bent about capitalism being evil, because I mean, I am in a sense pro-capitalism, but I do understand their points. Because after all, the thing that makes capitalism great is also what makes it terrible, which is that anyone can have an advantage. Unfortunately, if you already have resources to sell to people, you're going to unfortunately have a bigger advantage than others. And that's not even including the whole mess that happens when it comes to the private equity and how someone can sell off their private equity to have a huge advantage. And if you're a poor person with none, then yeah, capitalism isn't going to help unless you have services that people are willing to pay for. Key there is people willing to pay. And one of the big things, at least, that I got off of that bottom video there, from, like I said, from No Labels Necessary. The big thing that I got was that I might actually have a playlist set up, at least with these links. But yeah, the big thing that is really annoying is that way too many people don't really care. They don't think it's worth paying for. They don't think it's worth talking about. If you're not going to pay for the music, at least talk about it. Tell people like what you enjoy and why. Of course, that also factors in what I said in previous videos about at least what I understand of the introversion of sacrifice. People don't want to express themselves, and unfortunately, that includes talking about what you enjoy. Whereas I myself am using a 3D virtual model to basically give a visual idea of what I enjoy. Which honestly kind of goes back to a point that Andy Edwards did make about how influential the Dire Straits Money for Nothing music video is. Use of CGI there, and what am I doing today? Using CGI to show what I'm interested in. But yeah, that's one of the more curious and annoying things, that there's way too many people get into music, but they don't really care about it. They don't respect the art form. They don't respect it enough to pay for it. They don't respect it enough to talk about it. It's just there for background noise, and that's it. Of course, so there's always the question of whether or not people are also conditioned to be this way thanks to reality TV. Something that, which I referenced previously when talking about Tantacruel and his videos. But yeah. And I think one of the biggest things hurting music now is that too many people pay attention to what those people say, those who don't care about the music. And I think we should really come back to listening to not what people don't care about the music say, but those who actually are the hobbyists and the enthusiasts. Because at least you get a good idea of what people enjoy. Otherwise, the whole industry will fall just like MTV did. So that's it for my video. I am Austin, aka Neko Vermillion, Neko AV and whatnot, and I thank you for watching.